So let's be honest, kids are creepy. And I'm not talking possessed horror movie head spinning creepy, I mean the quiet kind of creepy. The kid who stares at the corner of the room and laughs at nothing. The kid who says something they shouldn't know. The kid who reacts like you interrupted a conversation that was already happening when there's no one there. I have an ongoing series on TikTok called Kreepy Kids where I share things children have said that are creepy, and those videos perform better than almost anything else I post. Why? I think it's because we've all either experienced it or heard something like it. And while it doesn't always feel dramatic, it definitely feels off. It feels all too real and all too unsettling. Welcome to Eerie and Curious, a space for the unsettling, unexplained, and the stories people can't forget. The eerie for the curious. This week, let's talk about everyone's favorite spooky archetype, creepy kids. A mom told me her daughter started attending a very old elementary school in their small town, one that the mom herself had attended. And 2 weeks into the school year, the little girl started talking about a friend named Violet, normal at first, until one day she was sitting in the corner of the living room having a full conversation with nobody. When her mom asked if she was talking to her, she got irritated and said, "No, I'm talking to Violet." Since then, she's recognized toys from decades ago and mentioned products that don't even exist anymore. And every time she's asked how she knows, the answer's always the same. Violet told me. Kids aren't supposed to feel layered like that. They aren't supposed to feel old and controlled. They're supposed to be loud, emotional, transparent, sometimes brutally honest. So when something about a child feels controlled, rehearsed, or empty, it's gonna give you the creeps. And that same emotional glitch shows up again and again in phantom child stories across the US and globally, actually. Children appearing alone on back roads, in parking lots, at playgrounds after dark, at your front door late at night, inside buildings that have been abandoned for years. The consistent first reaction isn't going to be fear. It's concern. That's the trap. If you see a woman in white on the side of the road, your brain might tell you something's off. If you see a shadow figure in your house, your body goes into defense mode. But if you see a small child alone at midnight, your brain says, help them. At least I hope it does. That instinct is what makes this archetype so effective. Another woman told me her niece, barely a year old, would constantly reach up and say, "Mel, Mel," even though her cousin Melvin had passed away 3 months before she was born and she had never met him. Then there was the mother who woke up at 2 a.m. to her 3-year-old running towards the front door saying, "Hold on, Uncle Jordan, I'm coming." And when she stopped him and asked who he was talking to, he said Uncle Jordan told him to let him in. The next morning, she learned Uncle Jordan had passed away around that same time. Humans aren't supposed to feel like portals, especially kids. And that's where this shifts from creepy things kids say to something more structured, more intentional. In the mid-90s, stories began circulating about children appearing at doors and car windows late at night with completely black eyes. Pale, calm between the ages of 6 and 12, no white in their eyes, no visible iris, just solid darkness. They don't scream, they don't attack, they knock, they ask to be let in. They say they need to use your phone or get a ride home. Witnesses describe overwhelming dread before they even notice the eyes, like their body realizes something isn't right before their brain does. And the detail that makes the black-eyed kids legend stick isn't just the eyes, it's the permission. They require it, they insist, but they do not force entry. When refused, they eventually leave. No confirmed attacks, no verified deaths, just lingering unease and people saying they felt like they narrowly avoided something. So now you have real kids saying things they shouldn't know, children appearing in places they shouldn't be, and this modern legend of kids calmly requesting access to your home. The common thread isn't violence, it's responsibility. You feel like you're supposed to help. There was another submission I received from someone who said that when they were little, something stayed in their closet with red eyes and long skeletal hands that would drag one nail down the center of their foot at night. They never told anyone, and years later, their cousin's children living in that same house complained about something touching their feet at night and described the same exact thing no one had told them. That story isn't black-eyed kids, but it is children interacting with something adults can't see. Children acting as a bridge. So when you hear about a child standing alone on the side of a road at midnight or knocking at your door asking to come inside, the fear isn't going to be loud, it's quiet. It's the feeling that something is wearing childhood like a costume. And if children are supposed to disarm you, what happens when they're the ones triggering your survival instinct instead? That's what we're diving into tonight as we move through 6 different regions in the US where phantom children have been reported appearing in places they shouldn't be. Some speak, some don't. Some vanish immediately, some interact long enough to make people question their own sanity. But all of them share one thing. You not only feel haunted, you feel responsible, and that's worse. If you saw a child randomly alone at night, would you stop for them? Would you try and help? Instinctively, if there isn't something deeply wrong with you, the answer is likely yes. But there are stories about phantom children showing up where they absolutely should not be across the US. Playgrounds after dark, back roads, empty neighborhoods, and sometimes right at your front door that makes you question whether you really would. In Abilene, Texas, in 1996, a reporter named Brian Bethel was sitting in his car outside a movie theater when two boys approached his window. It was night. The parking lot wasn't empty, but it wasn't busy either. The boys looked normal at first, maybe 9 or 10 years old, hoodies, quiet, calm. They asked for a ride home. He said they spoke politely, almost rehearsed. They said they needed to go back to their house to get money for the movie. They kept insisting he just needed to let them in. And that's when he felt it. Dread. Not fear, not panic, just a wave of something deeply wrong. He noticed he hadn't seen them walk up. They were just randomly there, and they wouldn't make direct eye contact at first. When one of them finally looked up, he saw it. Their eyes were completely black. No white, no iris, just solid black. They didn't threaten him. They didn't raise their voices. They just kept repeating that he had to let them in. He refused, and the moment he did, the feeling lifted. The boys turned and walked away. And that is the first sighting of the infamous black-eyed kids. Other people across different states have since reported nearly identical encounters. Same age range, same calm tone, same request to be invited in, same eyes. They don't force entry, they need permission. And that's what makes this one different from the other phantom children stories we're going to discuss this week. These kids don't just appear. They ask for help. And what do you think happens if someone says yes? Parks and playgrounds are downright scary after dark, and it's not necessarily the unfortunate homeless person trying to find a place to sleep in the night, or the unruly teenagers with nowhere to go and nothing to do but mischief and trouble. It's about the residual energy left from the day. The children's laughter, the high energy playing, the excitement. But what happens to that residual energy over time? In Lawndale, California, residents near a small neighborhood park have reported something strange happening after dark. The playground looks completely normal during the day, kids, parents, noise, movement. But late at night, people living nearby say they've seen small figures near the swings and jungle gym long after the park is supposed to be empty. Some describe child-sized silhouettes standing under the streetlights. Others say they've seen swings moving gently even though no one's on them and there's no wind. Police have reportedly been called more than once for the kids in the park after hours. Officers arrive and they find the playground empty. No footprints, no bikes, no one running away, just stillness. A few residents have said they heard laughter. Not loud laughter, not dramatic, just quick, childlike bursts that stop the moment they try and locate the source. There is no confirmed tragedy tied specifically to that park or a documented event everyone points to, just repeated sightings. And that's what makes this one different from Black-Eyed Kids. These children don't approach. They don't ask for permission. They don't interact at all. They just appear where they shouldn't be. And if a playground is meant for children during the day, what do you think it becomes at night? If you saw a child alone at the side of the road, you would help them, right? Instinctively, you would likely stop and help them find their adults if you aren't a monster. What if I told you this road was in Appalachia? Knowing what we know and essentially don't know about the region, would you still then? Across parts of eastern Kentucky, especially along the more rural backroads of Pike County, drivers have reported that late at night on roads that cut through the wooded areas, they've seen a child, alone, standing near the tree line. They're not in the road, they're not running or playing, they're just standing there. They're initially compelled to stop and help, but what they experience makes them question their own sanity. The child is usually described as young, maybe 6 or 7, sometimes barefoot, sometimes in clothes that don't quite look modern. The first instinct isn't fear, it's concern, because what is a child doing alone out there? Some drivers say they've slowed down and rolled their window down to ask if the child's okay. In certain versions, the child looks up but doesn't answer. In others, the child quietly asks for help, and then the moment the car fully stops, the child is gone. They're not seen running into the woods, they're not crossing the road, they're just gone. No footprints, no sound in the bush, nothing moving in the trees. Locals don't have an agreed-upon explanation. Some tie it to the old mining accidents. Others say it's just another Appalachian hate story. But what makes this one unsettling is how normal it feels at first. You don't feel haunted, you feel responsible. And that's what phantom children stories do differently than most other hauntings. They tug on your humanity and make you stop to help. Across rural Illinois, near parts of McLean County, there are reports tied to abandoned school buildings that haven't been in use for years. During the day, they look exactly how you'd expect: brick, faded paint, boarded windows, maybe some graffiti. But people who explore the properties after dark say they've seen something that doesn't fit the dilapidation and decay. Child-sized figures in upper windows, not moving, just standing there. Urban haunt explorers have reported hearing what sounds like small footsteps in hallways when they know that they're alone. The kind of quick, uneven pacing you'd expect from a kid running between classrooms. Some say they've seen the shape of a child dart past a doorway, too small to be an adult, too solid to be a shadow. And when they check the rooms, empty. There is no power, there's no lights, no one inside. What makes this one different from the roadside sightings already discussed is containment. These children don't appear in transitional spaces. They stay inside permanently, like they belong there. There isn't one confirmed tragedy tied to a single building that explains all of the sightings. No records everyone points to, just repetition. Figures in windows, footsteps in empty halls, movements where no one should be. And if schools are supposed to be loud, chaotic, full of life, what does it mean when something child-sized remains after everything else has left? What about when they remain even if the space is repurposed? Do they adapt to the new environment, or do they still experience what it was to them? So I've always been a conspiracy theorist. I mean, I was talking about aliens at like 10 years old, and I definitely got slack for being crazy. But our recent times are proving I wasn't crazy. I'm not currently crazy, just enlightened. Anyways, I've always had suspicions about Katrina. Like Kanye, at least with this, made sense to me. And with such tragedy often comes residual darkness from the suspected intentions and the chaos and trauma of the grief. Haunts. Energy that can't be erased. And in New Orleans, particularly in parts of the lower Ninth Ward, there are reports of phantom children that began circulating after Hurricane Katrina. As we know, entire neighborhoods were flooded, homes destroyed, streets emptied, and in the years that followed, some residents and volunteers described something that didn't feel like typical haunting stories. They described children. Small figures seen standing at the ends of empty streets, near houses that were never rebuilt, near water lines still visible on brick and siding. The thing about these figures is that they're so still. They're not running, they're not playing, they're just standing there, carrying the heavy weight of the tragedy. Some people said they saw what looked like a child near a doorway in a home that had been gutted and abandoned. When they approached to check, the space is empty. Others described seeing a child near the edge of a flooded lot at dusk, only to blink and realize nothing's there. There's no single identity attached to these sightings, no confirmed name or family names. Sometimes child hauntings can almost feel playful, but obviously this one doesn't. It doesn't feel mischievous either. It feels residual, like something left behind. When places experience trauma, people talk about memory imprinting. It's about energy clinging to locations. And whether you believe in that or not, the reports do exist. Children appearing in places where entire communities were uprooted. And what makes this version unsettling isn't interaction, it's the stillness. No asking for help, no approaching cars, no knocking on doors, there's just presence. If phantom children are tied to unfinished stories, what happens when the story isn't just one life, but an entire neighborhood, town, or city? How do those stories get their ending? Do they ever? Children are supposed to disarm you. You're supposed to want to help them. Their innocence should prevail, but what happens when it doesn't? What happens if you can't help them? What if they don't let you follow through? In West Virginia, along stretches of Route 2 near Point Pleasant, there are reports of a child appearing on the roadside late at night. Drivers describe the same setup. It's quiet, minimal traffic, you're alone in the car, and then you see a child standing near the shoulder of the road, not deep in the trees, not far off, close enough that you can see their face in the headlights. Most descriptions say the child looks around 8 or 9 years old, pale, expression neutral, sometimes described wearing older clothing that doesn't quite match the present day. Others say relatively normal attire for the time. The first instinct isn't fear, it's confusion, because why are they out there? Some drivers say they slow down and roll their window down to ask if the child needs help. And this is where it shifts. Unlike the Kentucky story where the child vanishes immediately, this one speaks, softly, calmly. Some versions say the child asks for a ride home. Others say they ask if you can take them just up the road. The tone is normal, no aggression, no threats, no fear, but witnesses describe something unsettling about the conversation. The answers don't line up cleanly with the questions. If you ask where they live, they give you vague directions. If you ask where their parents are, the response feels delayed, like they're thinking too long. A few drivers say that once the child gets into the back seat, the temperature inside of the car drops noticeably. Some say the rear view mirror stops reflecting clearly. And then at some point during the drive, sometimes mid-sentence, the back seat is empty. No door opening, no sound, no shift in the car, they're just gone. Drivers who return to the stretch of road later say it looks completely ordinary. No houses nearby that match the directions given, no reports of missing children tied consistently to these encounters. And what makes this one more unsettling than the others is the length of the interaction. You talk to them, you respond, you make a decision to help. And the longer you engage, the more something feels rehearsed. Not desperate, not confused, just slightly off. If a child asks you for help on a dark road, most people are going to say yes. So what do you think happens if someone doesn't realize that they're supposed to say no? So here's what I keep coming back to. Phantom children aren't loud. They're not cinematic. They don't burst through walls or chase people down highways. They stand there, they ask for help, or they say something they shouldn't know, and then they're gone. And what lingers isn't terror, it's the strange feeling that you were supposed to do something, that you were tested, that you almost opened a door. I think that's why these stories stick. It's not about jump scares, it's about instinct, about that protective reflex we all have when we see a child alone. That reflex is hardwired into us. Well, some of us. You don't debate it, you respond. And when something uses that instinct against you, even in story form, it creates a glitch. It makes you question your own reactions. Would I help? Would I hesitate? Would I notice something was wrong in time? That's what makes phantom children so effective. They don't overpower you, they disarm you. And the truly uncomfortable part is this. We live in a world where children actually do go missing, where alerts pop up on our phones, where there are real families searching, real investigations, real unanswered questions. So when we talk about phantom children or black-eyed kids or strange encounters on back roads, it brushes up against something real. There are actual case files, actual missing persons databases, entire systems built around looking for kids who never made it home. At least, that's what we've been led to believe. I'm not going to spiral into all of that tonight, but I do think it's part of why these stories feel heavier than something like a shadow figure in the hallway. Because the line between folklore and reality isn't as clean when it involves children. We live in a time where conversations about children aren't just ghost stories and urban legends. There are real headlines, real investigations. At least they say they're investigating, but who knows? Real documents that have come out, partially, that make people question how much they can truly protect their children, or children in general. And I think when stories about phantom children circulate, about kids being used, kids being approached, kids being alone in the wrong places, it brushes against something deeper. Something we don't want to look at directly. I'm not going into detail here either. I don't need to. Most of you know what I'm referring to. It's easier to process unease through folklore. It's easier to frame discomfort as a ghost story than to sit with the idea that there are real systems and real failures and real darkness involving children in our world. So maybe part of why this archetype never goes away isn't just because it's spooky. Maybe it's because it reflects collective anxiety. And I think when people hear about phantom children, their minds connect it all together, whether they mean to or not. It's easier to process something unsettling when it lives in legend. It's harder when it overlaps with real life. Maybe that's why the archetype keeps evolving. Maybe it's our way of processing fear we don't want to sit with directly. Or maybe there's something about childhood itself, that space between innocence and awareness that has always felt thin. Whatever you believe, the pattern is there. Children appearing alone, children asking to be let in, children knowing things they shouldn't, and adults left wondering whether they almost made the wrong decision. So I'll leave you with this. If you saw a child alone on a dark road tonight, would you stop? And if something about them felt off, would you trust that instinct? I will actually be posting the Kreepy Kids stories that I share on TikTok here in bursts, or you can go to TikTok and check them out. Keep an eye out for those. Subscribe and come back to see where we're heading to next. I don't know why I have such a hard time saying subscribe, follow, or whatever. Stay eerie and curious, and I'll see you in your next encounter.